What up guys, Brinks here, and today I'm going to teach you how to play the Kuei Grandmaster himself, Sub-Zero. This guide will be in two parts. In part 1, I'm going to go over the 3 main building blocks to playing the character, teach you how to perform his most used combos with some explanation of his combo structure, and go over his noteworthy moves and how you'll be using them. Part 2 will be a typical combo video, except I'll be showing example situations of where you'll be landing them in a real game. Think of this video as a blend between a character overview and a combo guide. Let's get started. So a good combo is like a good burger. You take your bottom bun, or combo starter, and then stack it with as much good shit as you can fit, before you close it off with the top bun, or combo ender. In Sub-Zero's case, he doesn't have the craziest combos, and there's a pretty similar structure many of them will follow. This is largely because, despite what you may have seen or heard during the beta, Sub-Zero is very much not a rushdown or mix-heavy character. His low options don't lead to full combos solo, and his overhead is extremely unsafe and quite reactable. Sub wants to zone you with his Klone push, ice ball, and ground freeze, and try and frustrate you into making a mistake so that he can ultimately freeze you and beat your ass. There are 3 main building blocks to Sub-Zero's combos that he forms his game plan around. His freezes, Ice Clone, Ice Ball, and EX Ground Freeze, his back 2, or his launching overhead, and his air strings Jump 1-2, Jump 2-1, Jump 1-1-2, Jump 1-3-4, and Jump 2-2-2, and your regular and EX dive kick. If we ignore cameos for a moment, Sub-Zero's combos are generally going to start with either a raw freeze or a string into ground freeze, then a launch from double back 2 into an air string extension followed by a ground string into slide. Sometimes you can end a combo in clone push, but regular slide is your highest damage combo ender without EX moves, as well as the most consistent ender since it hits so low to the ground. Although Clone Push does give you more distance from your opponent than Slide does, but Slide has some pretty insane corner carry, and Sub-Zero's combos get a bit more damaging in the corner. So, just a couple things to think about with how you want to end your combos. A final note, EX Clone Push and EX Slide both do the exact same damage, but EX Slide side switches. Although you'll usually want to save your meter for armor or ground freeze to start your combos. Now, let's really dive into the 3 building blocks that make up this character. Given that most of Sub's offense is very unsafe and full of holes, and despite cameos being able to make up for this a little, he still really only wants to hit you when you can't fight back. Which brings us to the first and most important building block, Sub-Zero's freeze. He has 3 unique ways to freeze the opponent between down back 1 or ice clone, down forward 1 or ice ball, and down forward 4 or EX ground freeze. In terms of combos, the game considers clone and ice ball freeze to be the same thing, as well as Frost and Sub-Zero cameo freezes, and you can only do 1 per combo. EX Ground Freeze does not have this restriction, but the scaling on it is garbage, so in the current version of the game, there's no reason to use more than 1 per combo, even though you can. All 3 freeze moves have different functions and roles in combos, so let's go over them. Clone, in the current version of the game, cannot be comboed into from the ground, and it doesn't last long enough to really use as a trap outside of the corner. So you're primarily going to be using it to call out jump-ins or non-armored wake-up buttons, and occasionally a poke when close. And, situationally, You can even use it as a brief shield to hide behind that'll absorb a hit so you can safely throw out an ice ball or set up a Kung Lao low hat or something. Otherwise, it'll be used to extend juggles. Also keep in mind, in this version of the game, Klone lasts for about 1 second, and has a cooldown of 3.5 seconds before you can place another one. Klone can be enhanced, but it costs 2 bars to do so, isn't any less punishable up close, and doesn't increase the damage enough to justify using it. %36% for 2 bars is abysmal, especially when the optimal meterless version of that combo route does 34%. If you really want to spend meter to get more damage, even within the exact same combo route, an EX dive kick will almost always lead to more damage than any other EX move, as it pretty much always combos into your most damaging air string, jump to 1, which we'll talk about later. The only possible use I can see for EX Clone is to very situationally catch an armored wake-up that would punish a regular ice clone. But I personally feel like that would still never be worth the 2 bars, and you're better off just blocking their armored wake-up if you're expecting it, and saving the meter for a breaker or combos. So, from what I can tell right now, this move is useless. Ice Ball is one of your main neutral tools that you'll be using in combination with your other specials to keep your opponent away. While Clone Push only travels about half the screen, Ice Ball travels the entire screen, although it is much slower to come out. Because of this, Ice Ball is too slow to be comboed into outside of specific Kameo setups. Its primary use will be to zone and harass your opponent from range along with Clone Push and regular ground freeze, or to call out a projectile from them as it'll usually pass through and freeze the opponent, and at worst you'll trade with them, meaning that you'll get hit by their projectile and they'll be frozen by yours. Depending on the trade and distance, you can still combo off the freeze before they break out. But if you were knocked down, the most you'll really be able to do is a wake-up slide. Keep in mind, sub's optimal meterless damage generally comes from starting combos with back 2, but depending on the trade, you might only have time to dash up and do a quick string, and if you don't have meter for ground freeze and your Kameo is on cooldown, you'll obviously only be able to get a string into slide combo. And if you're not sure, it's always better to go for the guaranteed but lower damage rather than risk them breaking out, blocking your back 2, and killing you for it. Most projectiles in the game will pass through Ice Ball without any interaction, but if you enhance it, the Ice Ball will usually destroy the projectile and still make it to the opponent, saving you from it while also likely freezing them. Beware that some characters have projectiles they can also enhance to beat out your regular Ice Ball, like Liu Kang's Fireball for example. If both projectiles are enhanced, however, they will destroy each other. Also, a quick side note, regular Clone Push will usually beat or mutually destroy other regular projectiles on its own, while the EX version will generally beat out regular projectiles and mutually destroy EX ones. And to add to that, Sub's Slide will duck under a lot of these projectiles and punish them if you're quick enough. But just be careful, as Sub briefly stands up before initiating the slide and can be hit if you're too slow. So keep all that in mind and don't just rely on Ice Ball. Finally, EX Ice Ball becomes a mid instead of a high, which forces them to either block or jump it, and it does 4% damage rather than 2%. The final freezing move for Sub-Zero is down forward 4, or what I've been calling ground freeze. This move has 2 main uses. Firstly, it's a good harassment tool to mix in with your zoning and keep away game, as it'll track the opponent and do slight damage to them, whilst, arguably more importantly, briefly slowing down whatever animation they're doing, sometimes letting you get some very unusual whiff punishes. Secondly, it is your EX combo extender, and basically functions as Sub-Zero's metered launcher. All three of your main ground strings, 1-2, 2-1, and forward 1-2, can all be hit confirmed into an EX down forward 4 for a full ground freeze combo. Now, as for what to do when you do freeze your opponent, let's move on to the second building block for Sub-Zero, his back 2. Sub's back 2 is his only meterless launcher that doesn't require a Kameo to extend from. Because of this, it's going to be your best friend whenever you get a freeze, as it leads to his most damaging combo routes, and feels damn cool to hit. It is an overhead, but the move is extremely unsafe on block, at an unholy -23, which means every character in the game is easily going to punish it with their most optimal starter and kill you. And since it takes 24 frames to come out, it's slow enough to be decently reactable if your opponent has both hands on their controller. The threshold for a move to be considered reactable based on the average human reaction time is around 16 or more frames, so back 2 obviously qualifies. So, unless you have a huge life lead and want to test if your opponent is still breathing for some reason, I don't recommend just throwing this out. This means that the only time you should be using back 2 is when your opponent is already frozen, or in a couple specific low hat setups I'm going to show you in a bit. As for comboing from back 2, if you connect with a grounded opponent, you're basically always going to want to do 2 in a row, unless you have some weird ass Kameo route you want to go for. There is a slight trick to the double back 2 combos, however, since you want to launch the opponent as high as possible after the second one, to give you the most time to go for your aerial follow-ups. This means you need to try and connect the second back 2 so that the first swing basically passes through their crotch or stomach. Be careful though, if you input it too early, the second swing will just whip entirely, and if you're too late, they'll be too low for your highest damage aerials to connect, which we'll cover more in the next section. If you're in the corner, you're able to connect 3 of these in a row into a string and then a clone freeze if you haven't used your clone freeze yet, after which you'll be able to do whatever juggle you want to end the combo. If you have already used your clone freeze, it's probably better to just do a double back 2 route even in the corner, since you generally need the mid combo freeze to do enough hits to out damage the double back 2 combo route. If your opponent is frozen in the air, such as from an anti-air clone or ice ball, then you'll only be able to go for a single back 2. And you'll want to delay it slightly so that they fall into it, just to make sure that both swings connect. One final note about back 2 is that you can cancel into a special or Kameo off of the first hit, although the full thing isn't cancelable. You do have to commit to this ahead of time obviously and can hit confirm it, so it's not something you'll be doing much, especially since all of Sub's specials are almost as punishable on block as back 2. This would only really be relevant if you have a Kameo that's particularly strong on block, such as a Kung Lao low hat, for a really gimmicky overhead low that will probably catch a few people. The only real use I'm aware of for this is for a very specific setup I saw in a video from Nick F_CA. I'll link the video in the description, but the gist of the setup is that you can use low hat to create an actual mix-up scenario using the first hit of back 2. To do it, you set up a delayed low hat, and then input a single hit back 2 into ice ball. The opponent now has to react to whether they will need to block the low hat first or the overhead back 2. This setup makes the reactable nature of back 2 irrelevant, since now you're trying to guess which move will hit first. The thing that makes this setup a bit more real is that either way, if they block wrong and get hit by either the back 2 or the low hat, the ice ball will connect and they'll be frozen for a full combo. The benefit of doing an ice ball here is that it's not as unsafe on block as back 2, though it is still punishable at anywhere from -11 at point blank range to -9 at max back 2 range. The other issue with this setup is that the low hat needs to hit the opponent between the back 2 and ice ball in order to make a combo. which means that technically there is no mix-up if the opponent knows the setup, as they can just stand block the first hit and then quickly block low and wait for the ice ball, which can then be punished. However, this setup is a variation of an existing setup, which is a delayed hat into raw back 2. And for that setup, all variations lead to a full combo if they get hit at all, whether low hat connects before or after the back 2. It is an extremely unsafe setup, but if you think your opponent knows you want the hat to hit second and will block it correctly, then you can risk going for the traditional setup to potentially catch them out. It's far from perfect, but a setup that only works the first time you use it is still a good setup, just so long as you pick the right moment to pull it out. The third and final building block that really brings Sub's whole kit together is what we'll call his aerials, but more specifically, his down back 4, or what I'll call his dive kick, and his 2 best air strings, jump 1-2 and jump 2-1. But first, a quick note about his other air strings. For jump 1-1-2, you won't really be using this, since jump 1-2 and jump 2-1 basically always lead to more damage. And then for jump 2-2-2 and jump 1-3-4, they're both sick looking combo enders, but they unfortunately will pretty much always do less damage than if you were to use the other aerials to continue the combo onto the ground, such as jump 1-2 into a 1-2 slide, for example. Jump 1-3-4 does have a bit of utility to it, in that if you just do jump 1-3, it's an easy way to combo into EX dive kick mid-screen if you have a high enough launch. So it's easier to set up than jump 2-1 and scales the combo less than jump 1-1-2. So it's a good option if you want to squeeze out a little more damage after a double back 2. Otherwise, the only real reason to use the full string are that they look cool as hell, but hey, sometimes that's the only reason you need. But let's talk about the 2 stars of Sub's aerials, starting with jump 1-2. This is an easy ground bouncing air string that you can use to easily extend just about any launch, and it'll be your go-to string to relaunch after an air freeze from a mid-combo ice clone. You can often connect 2 of them in a row before finishing the combo with a string into slide. The other notable air string for Sub is jump 2-1. It does a lot more damage than jump 1-2, but it's a little more strict in how you set up into it, as you generally need a higher launch afterward in order to continue a combo from it. Luckily, it's your go-to extender after a double back 2 combo, and if you haven't used a freeze yet, if you land it high enough, you can ice clone as you land, and the opponent will be frozen on the way down, letting you then follow up with an immediate jump 1-2. It also can combo into EX dive kick for a couple reps if you want to dump all your resources into a big damage corner combo. Generally, jump 1-2 will be your easier to follow up air combo extender, and jump 2-1 will be your more optimal higher damage option that's slightly more situational and a little bit harder to set up into. Now let's talk about down back 4. This dive kick can serve as a combo starter on its own, as when you connect with a grounded opponent, they'll be stunned long enough for you to combo into either 1-2 or 2-1, or if you land it low enough to the ground, you can combo into forward 1-2, or pretty much any of your ground normals, other than back 2. Moves like this that can mix up the timing of your landings are always really good to have in fighting games, to throw off an opponent trying to anti-air you, and it's even better when it leads to a full combo such as here. It's also a good option to whiff punish a projectile or certain horizontal moves your opponent may throw out. Given the floatiness of jumping in this game, it takes a lot of time to jump in on your opponent. Even if you jump over a move, you generally have a very small window to actually punish them with a jump in before they can just anti-air or up-block and punish you instead. Moves like Sub's dive kick give you a unique burst option from the air that can allow you to both evade and whiff punish moves that you wouldn't be able to punish normally with a standard jump kick, or at least not as easily. Be careful though, as the higher on the opponent you connect, the less time you have to combo from it, and the more unsafe it becomes on block if you mess up your punish with it. The other main use for it is in specific corner combos. Dive kick will bounce an already airborne opponent, and if the gravity is low enough, you can continue the juggle after the bounce. But typically it's both easier and more rewarding to just bounce them with jump 1-2 instead. Otherwise, it is a good combo ender in the event that the gravity of your juggle is too high to end with a grounded combo ender. Finally, the EX version gives all the same advantages of the regular version, but with extra damage and launch opportunities. In the corner, it's particularly strong, as you can cash out all your resources after a jump 2-1 and loop multiple EX dive kicks together for a large chunk of damage. You can also do this mid-screen off of multiple aerials, though the easiest is after jump 1-3, as we mentioned earlier. Jump 2-1 is also possible and does more damage, but the timing is very tight. The gravity of the launch from EX dive kick is always the same, which means that you can always get some kind of follow-up afterward, though depending on the position, you might need to dash first. The time you'd most want to use this is if you get an air freeze and you want to try and do some extra damage, since the optimal meterless combo from an air freeze will only do around 24%. Although honestly, you're better off only really cashing out like this if you get a launch from a Kameo or a raw back 2 somehow, since all 3 of your freezes will scale the shit out of the combo and you won't even break 40% for 3 bars, which is only worth it if it's going to win you the round or the game. Let's go over the remainder of Sub's notable moves, starting with his fastest standing button. Sub-Zero's jab, or his 1-2 string, starts up in 7 frames for the first hit, and will be your fastest close-range punisher if your opponent whiffs or you block something unsafe. It starts with a high, but it will be one of the 2 go-to moves you have to jail your opponent with if you hit them with one of your crouch pokes, down 1, down 3, or down 4. To briefly explain, when you get hit by a crouch poke in this game, such as a down 1 or down 3, you're in hit stun long enough that you can only block and cannot neutral duck an incoming high attack, as long as the move comes out within the duration of the hit stun. In the case of Sub-Zero, after you land a down 1 or down 3, your opponent is in hit stun for 11 or 12 frames respectively. Which means your stand 1, stand 2, and stand 3 will all jail from the poke. This just means your opponent cannot escape from the pressure, and is a way to guarantee that your high starter strings will connect, since the opponent has to either block or get hit, with no ducking or mashing allowed. A huge part of offense and strategy in Mortal Kombat comes from the rock paper scissors game that is created from pokes and jailing, so hopefully you got the gist of it from the brief explanation. Back to Sub's 1-2 string, if you land a poke, you can jail into 1-2. It's 0 on block for just the first hit, and -7 for the 1-2 string, which pretty much ends your turn. You do have the option to finish the full string, which is 1-2-2, and is only -4, which is very safe. But there is a gap that can be armored through before the third hit, so be careful. If you expect they're going to do this, you're better off just canceling into a safe Kameo instead, or even into Klone, which is matchup dependent whether they can punish you for it with their armor or Kameo reversal. If they start doing this, you'll have to make them start guessing if you're going to do the clone or not by throwing out additional pressure after the first 1-2 is blocked, while they're waiting for the clone animation to happen. It isn't foolproof or the safest thing to do, but depending on your opponent, you might be able to get away with some clown shit on block while they're focused on reacting to the clone. As usual in fighting games, you want to ask your opponent a question and see how they respond, which will inform your next move, so pay attention to how they deal with your block pressure and clone usage to figure out what kind of wild shit they'll let you get away with. Remember, stupid or unsafe options are only stupid if you keep doing them after being punished. If they repeatedly let you get away with unsafe shit, then you abuse that until they adapt. That's on them. Sub-Zero's second fastest normal, along with standing 3, is his standing 2, or, as you'll be using it, his 2-1 string. It starts as a 10 frame high that goes into a mid, and it has quite a bit of range for being as fast as it is. Like 1-2, it'll jail from your pokes, and is 0 and -7 on block respectively for each hit. Also like 1-2, the full string 2-1-2 ends in an overhead that is only -7 with a bit of pushback, and is therefore quite safe. It's also quite easy to hit confirm into your EX ground freeze, or block confirm into the full string or a safe Kameo. Just beware, the opponent can armor before the second and third hits, so the same mind game we discussed with 1-2 applies here. It is a more damaging string than 1-2, and obviously has more range. So while 1-2 is your go-to fast punish after blocking something unsafe, 2-1 will more be your go-to fast whiff punisher in neutral, but it's also fast enough to punish some unsafe moves on block. Finally, the animation for the string just looks fucking awesome. The next ground normal to go over is subs forward 1 and forward 1-2 string. It's slower than the other two at 15 frames for the first hit, but it's a pretty decent advancing mid, which is always good to have since your opponent can't duck it like the first hit of your other two main strings. Despite the slower startup, you'll be using this to punish your opponent's bigger whiffs from a decent range, or blow them up if they do something really unsafe on block, as it's your furthest reaching normal other than back 2. It does the same base damage as 2-1, but for some reason 2-1 scales the combo harder when you start with it, compared to forward 1-2. Which means you'll do less damage if you start a combo with 2-1, comparatively. The first two hits of the string are -4 and -7 on block, so it's generally safe unless your opponent is Li Mei, Liu Kang, Kung Lao, or Johnny Cage, who can all punish -7 moves to varying degrees. At the very tip of the hitbox, forward 1 is anywhere from -4 to -2. It seems weirdly inconsistent, but either way, this is very safe, and especially at this range. So you can kind of use it as a pseudo stagger. Since it's a 15 frame move, it's not particularly great at this, but in this version of the game, Sub-Zero's really got to make the most of what he's got. A quick note about the full string, forward 1-2-3. It isn't special cancelable, so normally you'll only be doing forward 1-2 into your EX ground freeze to start combos. But with the right ambush cameo, such as Goro, Scorpion, Sonya, etc., you can convert off of the forward 1-2-3 into a full combo. It's not super useful, especially since the two most popular and/or best cameos for subs, Kung Lao and Sareena, both give you better meterless combos from forward 1-2. But unless you're trying to make top 8 in a major, or hold your own against the fucking legions of top tiers in the upper ranks of Combat League, just use whatever cameo is the most fun for you. And if comboing from forward 1-2-3 is something you want to do, then there are multiple fun cameos that let you do that. Be careful though, as the full forward 1-2-3 is -12 on block, and you will get full comboed for doing. Alright, so that concludes your usual combo starting moves, but there's still a bit to go over for a few of the more situational moves in his kit. So first let's talk about BF3. It is your only low combo starter. If you hear people talk about Sub being a mixed character, they say that because he has this low and his overhead back 2. But this is a wild thing to say, however, since back 2 is glacially slow to come out, and is double digits of negative on block. And this low isn't even special cancelable, which means you need an ambush cameo just to convert to a full combo from it anyways. On block, the first hit is -7, and the second hit is only -5, so it is safe at least, though it only does about 11% on its own, which is more damage than a raw slide. So I guess you can kind of think of it as a safer, more damaging, but shorter range slide. As I mentioned, you need an ambush cameo to combo from it, but generally you're not going to be opening up many people with this move, and as I said earlier, Sub mainly wants to keep you at a distance until you're frozen. So the most you're going to be using this for is as a safe movement check in neutrals that can sometimes low profile, and can catch people advancing on you that just weren't ready to block. Basically, if you're feeling the urge to do a random ass YOLO slide in neutral, maybe try back 3-4 instead.
Hooray!
Another weird and situational move that Sub-Zero has is his 3-4 string. It's a 10 frame high that goes into a launching low. Just like back 3-4, the launch from the low can only be comboed from with an ambush cameo. Which means the only real use for this move is that since it comes out in 10 frames, just like your standing 2 string, it will jail from a successful poke. It's -1 and -7 respectively for each hit, which is mostly safe. But in a jailing situation, you're still probably better off just using 1-2 or 2-1 after a poke, because you don't need a cameo to combo from them, but the option is there if you want it. Otherwise, stand 3 is a decently ranged 10 frame normal that you can use as a high damage punish to start combos with or extend from a juggle. Now just a few miscellaneous things to mention before we get to part 2. Starting out with his 4-4 string, I literally don't know the purpose of this move. The 4 is a decent 12 frame high that's useful in some combos. As I mentioned earlier, it's usually a good way to end into a slide, since it's a high base damage move that's good to cancel into a special cameo. But outside of combos, you won't really be using it at all, which makes the low sweep second hit of it pretty useless, especially since that hit just knocks down and doesn't even lead to a combo. So I don't know what the purpose of it is. Next, your down 2 punish, where you can spend 2 bars for a full combo, seems extra useless on Sub-Zero. Both his stand 1 and his stand 4 are pretty decent anti-airs, and you can get similar or better damage for less meter doing an anti-air combo from any of those options, rather than blowing 2 bars for less than 30%, especially since you also have Ice Clone to anti-air with as an option. Not to mention, Sub has a very good hitbox on his down 2, so sometimes your best option is to just take the easy 14% from that, and save your resources. Only time I can see this mechanic being useful is if you get a down 2 anti-air, and spending the 2 bars on the launch will allow you to actually win the round from it, or the game, where they would otherwise survive just a raw down 2 anti-air. But, other than that, as far as I'm aware, there's no reason to ever go for this. One final note, as you can tell, Sub Slide is pretty much going to be the combo ender for everything you do. There will be a couple corner routes where you won't have time to return to the ground and you'll end in a dive kick in the air instead, but pretty much everything else you'll be using Slide. If you spend a bar to enhance Slide, it'll side switch and you can actually combo off of it with certain ambushes, even if you're using it as an armored wake-up, which is its other use for Sub-Zero. And with that, we've reached the end of part 1. I hope that was a clear enough lesson on how to play Sub-Zero. If you've learned anything, liking the video would be a much appreciated way for you to give feedback. If you have any questions, criticisms, or you feel I've missed something, feel free to leave a comment and I will respond as soon as I'm able. But now, for the rest of the video, I'm going to showcase several Sub-Zero combos, but try to recreate practical situations that you'll find yourself using them in during a match. If you made it this far in the video, you are awesome, and I greatly appreciate you. I hope you found this guide helpful, and if you did, I would be forever grateful if you could leave a like. If you'd like to see more guides like this, please hit that subscribe button, as I plan to make more guides like this for everyone in the game. And I also have plans for guides regarding specific cameo and character pairings, so stay tuned if that sounds like your thing. Otherwise, if you have any questions about anything I've discussed, or you want to request other characters for my next guide, please leave a comment and I will respond as soon as I'm able. Thanks for watching, and until next time, later.